Okay, welcome everybody to Town Board Work Session of Tuesday, May 7, 2019. And tonight we're going to be talking about leaf blowers. Speaking of myself, I have missed this conversation. I'm really
Well,
happy
glad
to
to
tonight.
contribute again.
I thought we were talking about the Newcastle Chapel Performing Arts Center.
Yeah, it's a good
You could
segue.
do that too.
No.
It's a controversial.
Okay, so we'll get this presentation together. I think a lot of what we're going to do, I will answer a lot of your questions, so it may make the most sense to get through as much as possible and then questions, but I'll leave it up to you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tracy Stein. I'm a resident of the town of Newcastle. I am a lawyer. I have a master's in science relating to energy and the environment, and I'm a volunteer with the Town Sustainability Advisory Board. And I'm going to call it SAB for short. I am part of a dedicated team of volunteers who have together committed hundreds of hours over 2 years to study the impacts of leaf blowers. We have done this as part of SAB's commitment to promote sustainability in Newcastle. In our efforts, we have spoken to dozens of residents and other hundreds of residents and other interested individuals. We have received comments both in favor of regulation and against regulation. Based on the written comments and public hearings, I'm here today to discuss our proposed compromise regulation that seeks to balance the public's interest in enacting legislation while seeking to permit leaf blowers on a limited basis. I will try to address the various issues that were raised and how we responded to them, and ultimately how we came up with the compromise. We've emailed everybody the report from April. I hope you have it, and you can refer to it as I speak if you'd like. As you listen, I do ask that you note a few things. SAB's proposal on leaf blowers is consistent with the trend throughout the country, and it recognizes the importance of leaf blower ordinances in promoting important health, safety, and environmental goals. If the town enacts this ordinance, we join what appears to be 50 or more towns and cities that have enacted gas blower prohibitions. It includes large cities and comparable suburbs: Beverly Hills, Malibu, St. Barbara, 19 places in California, based on my last check. The District of Columbia, Brookline, and recently Newton, Massachusetts, a complete ban in at least 6 northern Chicago suburbs, Mount Clair, New Jersey. Aspen has a complete ban, to note a few. Also notable, the city of Pasadena and Ojai, California now only use electric equipment to clean parks that cover 40 acres and 52 acres respectively. 14 towns in Westchester alone have gas prohibitions. Universities seeking cleaner options are Tufts has a ban, Harvard, Yale, and others are transitioning. I've been told our own school district has been able to make the transition to electric blowers on non-field areas. I mention all of this to show you that this is a common trend in sustainability. SAB first began to consider the environmental protection law because a number of residents asked us to do something, and they wanted it. We didn't come up with this because we wanted to do something restrictive. We were asked to look into it because people wanted it. Those of us who have worked on this report do so as concerned residents. The members and volunteers of SAB are doing this work not because we were paid, much like so many of the volunteers in our community, but we're doing it because we believe it's the right thing to do. That's why we're here. As volunteers, we have had to rely on the expertise of scientists, medical professionals, former EPA employees, and others who have presented testimony and evidence to support similar measures throughout the country, and most recently in Washington, D.C., which ultimately enacted a full gas blower ban this past December. We reviewed everything we received, including information submitted by certain industry professionals. For example, a self-described leaf blower expert, who we understand is a paid consultant for Echo, the leaf blower company, travels across the country lobbying and working to refute the science on gas leaf blowers. We received submissions from him and others in the landscaping industry who don't necessarily live in our town and may not necessarily share our concerns. In fact, some have an interest in defeating an ordinance here to stem the growing tide of what I've described are cities, municipalities, and others moving in this direction. Thank you for indulging me in my long introduction, and now I'll really get to sort of the heart of what our report is about. The law itself includes a number of revisions. So we are proposing revisions that would prohibit the use of gas leaf blowers only from June 1st to September 30th. It would permit electric leaf blowers all year round, and it would permit gas leaf blowers from October 1st to May 31st. Just briefly with exemptions, it always applied to school and town playing fields. It now includes tennis courts at various tennis and country clubs to also accommodate for these sort of public sports play areas. And then finally, I'd like to note, we have found that the technology for electric blowers is improving and evolving, and that's something I'll talk about. And it's for that reason we are also proposing that the town reassess the law in 2 years. So moving on to the concerns that were raised. They really sort of fell into these broad categories that are listed above. What is the seasonal period and what kind of leaf blower is included? The issue of whether or not noise is a reason for this regulation, greenhouse gas emissions, impact on residents' health, ultimately whether or not it would impact home values if we enact some kind of regulation, and the exemption. So I'm gonna jump to the question of what would be subject to the restriction and what is the period of the seasonal ban. Comments were raised about the date of the seasonal ban, namely that the dates would make it hard to accomplish heavier cleanups in spring and possibly spring and fall. The proposal that we came up with responds to that by starting the period in June to allow more time for a May cleanup. We also chose the period, which again is June 1st to September 30th, to correspond to what we have found was sort of like the common seasonal ban in Westchester. Was the most common that we found. The two overarching objections that we heard in our original proposal was that a year-round restriction on gas blowers would be too restrictive, and not permitting electric blowers during summer months would also be too restrictive. So the biggest change to our proposal was to accommodate these concerns. It now permits electric blowers all year round, to allow for cleaning up walkways of grass clippings, which was noted as something that was a concern for many. And it also allows to clean up any sort of like leaf accumulation during the summer. It also allows gas blowers in the fall to accommodate the concern that gas blowers may still be needed for purposes of the heavier cleanups. Turning to comments that were raised on the question of noise. They really ran the gamut of leaf blowers are so noisy and they're such an irritant, I have to close my windows and they're a major nuisance to me, to comments that leaf blower improvements have led to better quality machines, less noise. Based on our research, we believe that the ordinance is necessary to address noise harms, even with gas blower improvements that have newer, lower decibel models. There have been improvements in reducing decibel levels in gas blowers. One major issue we found, however, is that many blowers on the market or in use are still at dangerous levels. And I'll refer you to the New York Department of Environmental Conservation, which recognizes that, and it's part of our report. It recognizes that many still in use or on the market exceed safe noise levels. Even assuming that all landscapers and residents used newer, improved models, the recent testimony at the DC hearings over leaf blowers show that these new models do not eliminate the noise hazard. And for that, I would refer you to a study that's attached to our April report. It was conducted by the Associated Regional and University Pathologists, and it was submitted at the DC hearings. It goes by, I think, Arup Laboratories. Arup's ultimate conclusion was that gas blowers travel over larger areas and expose more homes and residents to dangerous noise than a battery-operated blower with a comparable rating. The other questions raised were about greenhouse gas emissions. There are residents who firmly support this measure because they feel whatever the impact, we have an obligation in our town to try to reduce emissions. There were those who claimed that a leaf blower ban won't have a significant impact on reducing emissions and therefore we shouldn't try. Our town has committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and to doing our part to comply with the Paris Climate Accord. And for that, I'm grateful to this board for enacting that. We believe, SAB believes that a law to address gas leaf blowers, a machine driven by dirty fossil fuels, is a concrete, important, and accepted way for a town to seek to reduce emissions consistent with our mission. I also think it's worth noting that SAB conducted an analysis where we tried to estimate the proposed the impact of a proposed environmental law that would eliminate gas emissions, and we came up with a figure of 135 metric tons of CO2 each year, which is comparable to 29 cars off of the road in a year. And then finally, the strength of our initiative should be viewed in the context of how it supports a broader movement to support to eliminate gas blowers. This law in our town may influence surrounding towns to enact their own restrictions, much like the plastic bag initiative. As more local towns commit to addressing leaf blowers, pressure mounts on Westchester County itself to act. By joining the others who have enacted these protections, we also help to drive critical innovation for better, stronger blowers, electric blowers. And then on the question of pollution and impacts on residents' health, there were a number of different comments. One was that leaf blowers, not allowing leaf blowers during the summer and not allowing gas blowers during the fall season would increase growth of pests like ticks, rodents, and molds. There were those who argued that pollutants are not a prevalent problem with them. And then on the opposite side were those who felt like less airborne debris from the pollutants and from the particulate matter would mean for better air quality, and for those, certainly those suffering allergies and asthma would be also beneficial. As a preliminary matter, the modified proposal eliminates the concern about the growth of pests. By allowing gas leaf blowers in the fall and electric blowers for the summer, there's no longer an issue that there's no way to clean up leaf piles and that it would lead to any kind of pest problem. On the issue of pollution and environmental contamination, of course, all of us in the area of anyone using it knows you only need to stand near or hold a gas blower to smell the fumes and exhaust that come from it. Aside from anecdotal evidence like that, there is widespread recognition that the pollutants released from leaf blowers are hazardous to children, adults, and the workers directly exposed. And for that sort of backup, again, refer to the report. The New York State Department of Conservation website lists the pollutants and dust particles on its website. The American Academy of Pediatrics New York chapter, through Dr. Lucille Weinstein, who is the president, also lists all of the various toxins and particulate matter issues on that website. Again, it's a who's who of toxins. These notable, it's worth noting that these organizations and experts, along with the others in the DC hearings, have determined that the exposure to emissions from gas leaf blowers are dangerous, and they are harms that exist today. Moving on to the questions of property values. There were concerns that not allowing residents to use gas leaf blowers would impact the ability to maintain property and therefore reduce property values, or may even impact residents who want to come into the community. And then there were also concerns that landscapers would charge more if they couldn't use gas leaf blowers. And the issue that Newcastle lots are larger than other Westchester towns that have adopted a ban. And the issue of whether or not you can maintain a property without a gas leaf blower. We haven't seen anything to suggest that a prohibition on gas blowers would result in people not buying in the town of Newcastle, or that it would impact property values. As for maintaining the aesthetics of properties and the size of our properties, our investigation has revealed evidence that electric leaf blowers are strong enough to take care of our properties, even in Chappaqua. The cost of electric blowers has fallen and the technology has improved. It allows for longer use. There are landscapers in our county and throughout the country who now use them. The testimony from the DC hearing specifically addressed this, and they found that that electric leaf blowers are a viable alternative to gas blowers. Certainly consistent with this position are all of the different towns and universities and other businesses as well, who now have transitioned to battery-powered electric, equipment and are able to manage even in larger sizes, lot sizes. On the issue of an increase in landscaping costs, I believe the claim is that it will take longer to clean properties. While we have had some landscapers claim that electric leaf blowers will cost more, we have seen little to show that it will take longer to clean. It may well be a function of homeowners needing to modify and reduce their own reliance on leaf blowers, which is one of our environmental goals. And it may well be telling your landscaper to leave grass clippings on the grass where they serve as good nutrients rather than what is often a hog wild approach to spraying them all over your yard. And that's actually what I instructed my own landscaper on my property, which is 3 acres, and only does the walkways, and there was no increase in the cost of my landscaping. This was from last year. Also, notably, the cost for running electric blowers is actually lower because of the reduced cost of fuel and maintenance, so it ultimately could mean lower costs for landscapers. We looked at Scarsdale, and also they have a number of homes that have a larger lot size, and we did not find any issue. We had not heard from any resident or landscaper that the Scarsdale law had been an issue or it resulted in increased landscaping costs. Sorry, that was a long slide. The exemptions I sort of talked about, we previously did not have the country clubs and pool associations, and realized that to be consistent with the town and schools, that they should also, where there are, it really accommodates their tennis courts and golf courts, much because it's play field areas type thing. Now, the next real sort of question becomes about enforcement, and many questions have been raised about enforcement, and we know there will be challenges for any regulation. SAB is committed to working on educating homeowners and workers about the law and the benefits of the law and best ways to comply with the law. In terms of actual enforcement, in our report, we've proposed concrete, focused examples of what could be done. We received comments that the town should ban certain gas models and allow others and require registration to make sure they are using the most up-to-date model as an alternative. So I want to address the issue of alternatives. SAB can't endorse this position. For the reasons I've discussed, there still continue to be health, safety, and environmental impacts, even with newer models. Second, to enforce a provision like this, we believe that the town would bear substantial administrative costs. First, coming up with a list on what should or should not be allowed, then informing the police or other enforcers what to check for and what is and is not allowed, and comparing against authorized, unauthorized models, all of which would be burdensome, impractical, basically impossible, terribly costly. To add to that, to require landscapers to register machines would require an additional burden of having town personnel have to go through and commit their own time to figuring out what's included and what's not. So we just we feel that it's it's just much easier to have a readily identifiable standard based on the type of the machine, gas or electric, and that would satisfy the important safety goals. And I do want to mention again, DC as an example. They had in place regulations that first monitored gas blowers based on not exceeding certain decibel levels. They found that enforcement was so difficult and ineffective that in December of this past year, they moved to a full year-round prohibition on gas blowers. Lastly, we welcome the opportunity to talk more with the town. I know it's been discussed that perhaps we have a green certification process overall, and it's a great idea, and we look forward to working on that as we move forward on sustainable law and practices. And I have to take this chance to conclude by saying, there's a choice before you. And this town can join places like Washington DC, Aspen, did I mention Aspen?
You did.
Okay, oh, you're listening. And others in recognizing that gas leaf blowers are an unnecessary threat to health and the environment. And in doing so, Newcastle can take our own small step to making our own town a healthier, more sustainable community. Thank you so much for listening to all that.
Okay. So, let me start off by saying this is not a public hearing. I gotta check that in there. So, now we do allow comments in our work session, but we're gonna really try to minimize them because it's not a public hearing, and we're gonna have a public hearing. And we actually have a packed agenda tonight, and you know, the time for extensive public comments are during the public hearing. So, but I you know, don't really wanna silence anybody either, we're just gonna ask that if you have comments to try to keep them brief. Because again, we are gonna have a public hearing.
Yes.
When are we gonna set the public hearing? Tonight or what?
We can talk about it.
What? Because we're gonna,
We can talk.
I just wanted to preface that, we're gonna discuss
That's what
it.
we wanted to do, we wanted to be able to set the public hearing, so.
But we can set it tonight.
Absolutely, sure.
So we'll do that, you know. But
May 28th of June.
You have a lot on May 28th already, I think. Yeah, I feel like we have like three.
Well, while we're figuring it out,
I
start
think
asking my
it goes
questions.
today, yeah.
Alright, I have a question or a few of them. The usage of the electric leaf blower, pardon me, the efficiency, pardon me, of the electric leaf blower, what data do we have that shows or establishes it's equivalent or close to equivalent, or whatever it may be, to the current gas-powered one? So, if I am a homeowner who has a large place to blow and clean and I wanna continue doing so, even if I can transition to an electric blower in a year or two from now, whatever we decide today and whatever we decide going forward, we asked this or discussed this before, what's the battery life, what's the cost of the battery, how many do you need, how long can it be sustained in terms of on continuously? These are questions that I think that are gonna be important for residents and for us when we're making our determination. Environmental issues aside, noise aside, quality of air aside, what can you point us to specific data as to all of these questions so that we can make that educated determination that we're really apples to apples in the end in terms of its usage?
So when we had Echo here, which was last summer, they demonstrated machines that have equivalent capability to what is available on a gas leaf blower today.
Admittedly, I don't recall that, I mean, I recall the meeting, but I don't recall all the data.
One of their points was that if you run them at full speed to be equivalent to the gas leaf blowers, their life is 20 minutes or so per battery. But that there's a, if you don't trigger it to the high power, which is still sufficient to do a lot of the work around the property, maybe not all of it, that those would last 2-3 hours per charge. So somebody can carry around a charger, or they can carry around 4 batteries and be able to make it through a day.
Assuming that they are judicious in their
I was gonna say a
trigger-
landscaper
the
for
trigger
a full
pull.
day,
So I think
20
he's
minutes
right.
and full power.
I think, you know, if we can
depending on
get
what
more
they're doing.
information on that as best we can, or even recycle that information again, because your average homeowner may or may not be as skilled in the trigger finger in terms of clearing their own property, and it could be prohibitively expensive. Not that I'm asserting that it's.
Clarify though, this is not for fall leaf cleanup.
No, this,
Right.
right,
This is summer
exactly.
cleanup,
Summer.
and
You should not need to be blasting.
A lot of it goes back to the
Last
a
couple
lot of it
weeks.
goes back to the education component, because like I said, if people learn to sort of focus on walkways, don't use it at full speed, you know, we've seen that models are available, if you look online and stuff, there are models that are available that have longer term, that are longer batteries, and that the technology is evolving. So, you know, it doesn't have to be a 20-minute battery capacity. And I guess the other evidence is that there are green landscapers using this equipment, but I think it's an important point.
And then the other question or issue I had is, you brought up Scarsdale, and they're 25% over 1 acre lots or 1 acre lots. I would imagine that a lot of our lots that are larger than 1 acre may not be usable 1 acre. In other words,
Right.
you're not blowing
Right.
the vast majority of your acreage. So, I don't know if that's the same situation with Scarsdale, I don't know how wooded they are comparably, but you specifically asked them about whether they had any negative or adverse impacts from realtors or from prospective homeowners and who are coming. In other words, there was nothing articulated to that, this really was an issue. I assume that
We had reached out, I know, we had reached out to, they have a sustainability advisory board as well, and I think there was someone who spoke to a landscaper. We reached out, and I also think somebody, I don't remember who spoke to their town supervisor to get the information on their lot size, and we did make the inquiry, but I don't.
I tend to think you're probably right, it probably has little to no impact, but what would be interesting to know is maybe speak to some realtors. Does that come up an issue in Scarsdale that you can't use your leaf blowers from this time of year and
Right,
that?
well, and they've had it since 2006.
Yeah, but there's other municipalities, Rye, there's Sleepy Hollow, I think Merrimack Town and Village. I would imagine that it's not an issue to them, but maybe some realtors giving you some feedback.
In a very unscientific manner, I have spoken to realtors in different towns, and
I don't know if there is a scientific manner to
yeah,
realtors.
that was the problem. I was looking for the scientific manner and it didn't exist. But someplace like Scarsdale, property values are going up. They're going up faster than they are here.
The equipment.
We're not ready for public comment yet, but thanks.
Yeah.
I hear your
So-
comments back there, Russ, if you can keep it down, that'd be
So-
great, thank you.
The realtors really were oblivious to the fact that there was a law in a lot of cases that limited things. It was just another law that the town had passed, just another provision that the town had passed to them. It didn't affect value.
Seems to me it'd be quite the opposite. Being a green town is actually gonna attract some
100%.
people. And
Yeah.
if anybody's not gonna live here because we have a ban on gas blowers in the summer, I say, see ya,
Yes.
seriously.
We would agree, but that's.
Well, I won't say it in the same, I won't say it in the same way, but I tend to think that your research is right, you're going to be hard pressed to find someone to say, ooh, that was a
I
long
also,
word.
I also
That-
wonder, like
that
20
it's
years,
going to impact value.
sorry, 20 years ago, they weren't using leaf blowers on our properties here either, so I don't know.
There
Seems to be a
was a
fabricated issue.
landscaper during the public hearing who was, Jim, there was a landscaper that was with that city near you who had said he works in Scarsdale and that he uses just the electric, when he's in Scarsdale.
He also mentioned that he worked on much smaller properties.
I think the most, as much as we can do to show a marriage between efficiency and economics and environment, the better place will be. And while I won't say good riddance to people who wanna move to Newcastle, whether or not they're in support of a
Not only
leaf
that,
blower ordinance,
look,
but I don't think.
some people can afford to have a landscaper do their properties. Some people cannot afford to have a landscaper do their properties. Some people may pay to have a landscaper do their properties, but they're on a budget. So, to me, the whole question of cost is very property dependent. So in your case, you mow your lawns, leave your clippings in the summertime, which is like a great thing to do, and you have a few little walkways on your 3-acre property.
I have plenty of walkways.
No, I understand, but it's walkways. I really think, there's a lot of different types of property in Newcastle with a lot of different, I'm gonna call it, basic maintenance. I'm not talking about fancy landscaping and pristine lawns and, cutting across the grade one week and the other way the other week. There's definitely people who do that, but I'm not talking about, there's lots of different maintenance scenarios. And I kind of am curious, to go back to Jeremy's point, about sort of a real kind of direct model to model comparison. The cost of the models, the full power shelf life, because depending on the property, full power may be needed, not walkways, with a few little pieces of mulch that escape from their lining. But I think that would be very, very helpful, and I think the issue of whether it's gonna cost people more, I think sometimes, I don't wanna say preaching to the choir, but when you're kind of talking to people who think just like you get answers that you wanna hear. And I kind of feel it might be worthwhile to, you know, take some average properties, non-average properties, just price it out. Because I know that I've been told that should we go all electric, my property, my maintenance costs on a weekly basis will go up by about 50%.
But we're not going all
In the summer.
electric.
Right, you're not, and it's also certain time
No,
periods.
I'm talking in the summer, it doesn't matter, there's certain
What do
things
you
that have,
need to do during the summer?
the driveway. It's long.
So I would say, I've been to Tracy's driveway, it is one of the largest driveways, the longest driveways I've been on.
It's long,
I don't use,
So
I don't
the
do that in my
Tracy's,
driveway.
you don't do the driveway, okay, yeah.
but I have to, just because of the way the landscaping works out. And I don't have just one driveway, another one, so I'm just saying, maybe it's, as I said, if it's like $25 a month, $30 a month, okay, you know, it's great. But if it ends up being sort of significant to people, I think that has to be a concern, so I think
So
what's not being factored in is if because I think the technology is going to get there, there's no doubt in my mind that they're gonna figure this out for all the reasons that you mentioned, let alone it's easier on the landscapers' ears.
An issue I didn't even talk about.
Yeah, but so I mean for just employee happiness. I think that, you know, kind of trying to get a handle on the actual models themselves and what they can do would be great.
So Hala, it's the same thing with what Jeremy was asking, it was hard to get empirical data on this. For towns that have gone that route, people that we have spoke to in those towns have said they have not had an increase in cost. Granted, it might not be your property. If I was to ask somebody in Newcastle that, you know, if this came about, a landscaper, would you charge more? Their answer is gonna be a quick yes. But when the reality of competitiveness becomes real for them, they end up having to be in line with everybody else. And what they end up doing, what I was told, is that they end up like we have, reduce the amount of maintenance that they do using a blower, and so they leave some areas that might have been pristinely managed before. And again, not your property. They might leave those settled and just do hardscapes. That's what we have found, but I don't, there isn't an empirical study that gives me that data that I can point to and say, you know, look at the DEC report, and da-da-da-da-da-da. It doesn't exist. I would love to find it.
So I think sometimes people are just trying to think of reasons not to do it. I mean, to be honest with you, I think we need to do something. And then the question is, does this go in my mind, the question is, does this go far enough? Now, I'm not saying I approved the last draft, because I didn't think it was the right approach. But, you know, to me, it's not a question of are we gonna do something, it's a question of what are we gonna do to have the biggest impact while still trying to, you know, make it so that, you know, this people don't go crazy, pretty much, you know, to summarize it. You know, I think this is a good compromise, whether it goes far enough, I'm not sure, to be honest with you. But I think you guys, it's a reasonable approach.
Well,
We're
I think
supposed to,
I
you
think
know-
it's incremental, right?
Right.
I mean, you're suggesting within 2 years to revisit it potentially based on technological changes and, you know, we have a saying in consulting, right, that you don't boil the ocean, which essentially means, you know, don't try to take on impossible tasks, and this doesn't boil the ocean, right? I mean, the ocean's boiling,
Well, they are,
but
they are getting boiled.
We're getting ages.
you know, but this is, I feel like you guys, my personal view is that you guys did a really excellent job of taking all of the feedback that you heard in the fall.
Thank you.
And creating revisions that are responsive to all of the concerns that you heard, and that this is something that is reasonable and reasoned and incremental.
I agree, but I think what's very important to me is it's very easy to spread untruths and conjecture, and if you can provide that education up front as opposed to later, to show that as best we can, these folks have not sustained any value decrease. These folks pay X amount of dollar in comparable situations, and these are the types of machines, and again, the gentleman who came before in the past, you know, had said that. here are the very specific benefits which you lay out here, but I think also it has to be a much more bulleted, easy to digest report, because this is 70 pages long. So your average bear is not gonna read this. It's, you know, if you look to Facebook, everyone just wants instant gratification and instant answers. So I think we have to boil that down just to be more digestible. But I do think that we're on the right path, and you know, Rob has said this repeatedly, you know, if we're going to stand behind something, it's not just words, you know, with the Paris Accord, you have to do an act. And whether it's equivalent of 24 cars or 29 cars or 15 cars, that's not the point. It's sustainable in other communities, it can be sustainable here, even if it has to be tailored to make it, you know, proper for this town.
And it should be noted that the enactment of this, if it does get enacted, is not until next June now.
I think it
So
should be
we have-
September. Why wouldn't we do it in September?
Well, it's not gonna make a difference,
Do it.
It's not gonna make a
Yeah.
difference then,
So why wait until next June? Why not do it?
because that's the first time that there is some
There's a ban.
restriction
But if-
or-
But you have to also
Right.
get people to
But if we
prepare in advance.
pass
Well,
it, and
that's
then,
where
yeah,
where I
that's
was
what I'm-
heading, where I was heading was, that gives us a number of months to educate. And like the SAB did on other issues that we've put forth, we just don't put it forth and walk away. We put it forth and then we add education to it, signage, everything we need to get it to be adapted in the community as best it could. So that is our plan, that was our plan last year, it's our plan this year as well. And that's why there was no way we were gonna say, let's enact it in, 30 days.
Have you spoken with the homeowners association, for example, at Old Farm Lake?
Personally, no.
Because we've gotten some feedback, and this is where education comes into play. What are they concerned about in the fall when they can use their blowers? What are they concerned about in the summer? Is it a misconception of what they need it for?
Right.
Or do they really genuinely need it? So I think part of this equation has to be also more outreach, A, to make sure people understand what they can and can't do, and B, so we can understand how this impacts them specifically.
Well, that email we got today, as a matter of fact, which I didn't forward it yet, but
It's a
Yeah.
reasonable inquiry, but we have to.
well, their position is, you know, they look at some of the exemptions, like, you know, the big places, right? And they say, well, we're a big place, we should be exempted too. Now, my response to them, just one person's opinion, was, you know, the big spaces are mostly recreational facilities, you know, and an argument can be made that with the homeowners, you know, your houses are actually, with the condominium association, their houses are actually closer to each other. So if somebody's actually, you know, it's maybe not 120 homeowners, you know, find it offensive. But, you know, if a certain percentage do, they're gonna be a lot more negatively affected due to the proximity, as opposed to when you're on a 3-acre lot, you know.
Well, and what about the homeowners associations though that have recreation facilities?
Well, we said tennis courts are
If they have
exempted.
basketball courts and,
Well, tennis courts are exempt, I guess you could put basketball courts in
well,
there
I don't
too.
think it said at homeowners associations.
It does, tennis
It
courts.
says homeowners
Also
association
tennis
tennis
courts.
courts.
You could add basketball courts.
If we
Yeah,
need to extend it to
basketball
a different type
courts
of playing field, we can. Because the original intent was playing fields would be exempt. We didn't feel that we should be affecting a game or the health of somebody on a field like that by having leaves on those fields. So we agree there. If we need to extend the homeowners association to say playing fields and tennis courts or basketball courts and tennis courts, I'm all for that. But what I think is not to the environment's benefit is when your homeowners association is blowing the driveway, blowing the parking areas that can easily be swept or just be left alone.
Well, I think we have to make that inquiry, because
Well,
as
use
much as we
gas.
may find it not
That'd be
unnecessary, that doesn't mean they don't have a right to do it, if they wanna do it, so we should be speaking to them to make sure that we understand their concerns and address them.
Will do.
2 suggestions before we sort of go into a public hearing about this, because I assume that you guys will do sort of a summary at the public hearing as well. The first is, don't bury the lead on this, so you start with the summary, which is great, and then you go through all of the details, but I feel like we gotta come back to the summary, because the fact of the matter is that this is so incremental, and it is such a drop in the ocean, and it's an important drop in the ocean, but it's also not that challenging. It's not that difficult to implement this. We're talking about only 4 months of the year, only gas-powered leaf blowers. Electric blowers are still allowed over the summer. I feel like we gotta return to that, because I don't want people to get lost
right.
and miss the
Right.
fact that what you
Education.
come back with is so vastly different from where we were in the fall, right? So there's that. And then the second thing is, I think we need to spend more time talking about the why. So, yes, residents came to us and asked for this, but they asked for this for a reason, right? And, you know, it's not lost on me that we kicked off this conversation last fall at the same time that the UN IPCC report was released. We're having this conversation today, the day after the UN climate assessment report was released. And, you know, that's an important context to the conversation that we're having. So, yes, change is hard, but I think we're also asking people to come with us on the journey that they've told us that they wanna be on, because they chose to live in this town, and because we have the comprehensive plan that we do, calling for, you know, a greener and cleaner environment.
Thank you, we'll take under advisement.
And one of the slides I think would be helpful is where you compare the first version versus where we are now.
Yes, 100%.
We'll do it, and it's in the report, but.
No, I know, but
Yeah.
that's a good one because it shows that, you know, you guys are you're listening and you're being responsive.
Cause we wanna post something too on the website, and so a few key slides would be very helpful.
Okay,
This whole thing is posted, plus a draft law, but just for the public hearing, it's good,
Right.
you know, and a short version. Like even a short version for Facebook, like Jeremy said, I mean, nobody's gonna look through the
70-page.
20, yeah, whatever it is. Just dive.
That was for your benefit.
I know. But it's not a bad idea to have a version
It
for
was a good read,
Facebook.
don't get me wrong, it was a good read.
I just looked at the pictures.
Or you're on the beach.
So this is gonna be on our
Great.
next agenda, to formally set the public hearing for June 11th, but everybody should set mark their calendars now. That's the date, we don't have anything else on the agenda at that point, so we will try to keep it light to be able to focus our attention on this.
Is there a draft? There is not a draft law yet with these revisions in it, correct?
There is.
There is now.
It's on the website also.
But it's just draft, I mean, it's a
Oh, I
draft.
looked yesterday, it wasn't there, okay, so,
You're right. It wasn't there yesterday.
okay.
No,
I only post when I have a link, so I don't wanna post a copy, I only post when there's a link, so that's why I wanna make sure.
Yeah,
it's
now,
there.
you
Thank
can find it now under the proposed legislation, also the SAB page, also latest committee news.
You guys really did a tremendous job and. it's
Thank you,
really
it was no big
amazing.
deal to post it.
Yeah,
Oh, I meant that.
You got it. I heard it said something nice about you
lot of
guys.
work.
Let it be. But thank you very,
Did you
very
hear
much.
hundreds of hours? Yeah.
Yeah, I
Thank
mean,
you.
does anybody wanna say anything? You guys are keen? Frank?
The only concern that I would really have, that they have made much better strides with it, in my opinion. But the only concern that I have is we all talk about how great it is and how much good it's gonna do. If it's so good, why do we need to have the exemptions? If it's so easy to meet the new law, why is there a need for exemptions? You know, we're talking about limiting gas-powered leaf blowers for 4 months out of the year. Have at it. But why do ball fields need to be exempt? There's, in general, the 4 months you're talking about, there are no leaves on the ball fields, right?
It's a good point.
I think that's fair.
Yeah,
So, the law is so
I think
great.
that's fair.
I mean, personally, I'm gonna take it upon myself, if this passes, to do everything I can to contact all of those people, to talk to them about why they should voluntarily come on board, and I would hope that we would be bringing them along before the
But
next
I
iteration
would think
in
that
2
if the
years.
law is as good as we're forecasting it to be, that there shouldn't be a hardship. And if there's a hardship for organizations like that, what about the homeowner that works all day, that cares for his own yard, that has to come home at 5 o'clock at night, cut his grass, and blow the leaves off his driveway and his walkway? I'm just saying, and what about the homeowner that has a gas leaf blower for their fall cleanups and whatever else? Are we saying that that homeowner now has to also buy an electric leaf blower to care for their driveway and walkways in the summer months? I think that those are hardships that should be looked at.
You know, I think that's fair, but sometimes, I've thought the exact same thing as what you're saying, and something that kept on ringing out in my mind, a little different but somewhat the same is, you know, the sky was falling, for lack of a better term, when the ban went into effect with smoking at bars and restaurants. How is this gonna happen? How are these small businesses gonna stay? And now it's just, once you change the way you do things and what you expect and how you live your life, it takes a little bit of time. And maybe the answer is, you know what, when you're blowing a big field, because you can't, at least now, from what you're sharing, hold down at full blast for 40 minutes to blow and clean an entire field. But you can little shots, you know, at the periphery. But maybe over time, in 5 years, we're one of many other municipalities, and the next step comes into play. So sometimes it's not just jumping right into it, it's a piecemeal.
No, and that's fair, that is fair.
But I think your question is a very reasonable one. If it's good for the goose, it should be good for the gander, but
Absolutely,
you know,
and I think that a lot of those organizations primarily are municipalities and big powerful groups. And I think that the ones that are gonna be affected the most severely by this is that small first-time homeowner that maybe just bought their little house in Chappaqua, or the small business that's struggling to
if they haven't been scared away by the ordinance.
I've been here 27 years, it's gonna take a lot to, whatever hasn't scared me already.
I'm being
Yeah,
facetious,
I
I was being
No,
facetious.
but I will tell you though, back to your point that you just made about the bars when the smoking ordinances came in. I was working at that time, I'm an electrician by trade, and a lot of my customers that were barkeeps and restaurants, quite a few of them went out of business when that law was first enacted in the city of New York. So, it's not something to laugh off. I'm sorry?
It's been phenomenally successful for bars. There are
The
more
bars that are still here.
and more people going to bars.
Well, I think
Yeah,
the
we
point,
don't
the
need to
point,
argue that.
the point we're
I
saying.
just wanted to point that there's always an unintended
Of course,
consequence.
of course, I
And I
realize
just
that.
wanna, that's the point that I'm trying to bring out, not to debate this whole
Right, I
thing.
understand.
I think your point is very well taken, I think
And
it's,
I
yeah,
agree.
thank you.
I
And I
agree.
appreciate you taking the time to let me talk though.
No, well, you talked a little too long, I'm just kidding. That's a joke. I'm friends with Frank, I can joke around. But, I actually agree with your point also, not for the reasons you said, I think it's hypocritical. I think also we're gonna have an impact, and if we wanna reduce even more carbon emissions, then why exempt these big property owners, cause that's a big piece of land and they're out there for a long time. And by the way, a point that you actually alluded to, but we have actually had the better ability to absorb the cost. I mean, what does it really cost for a municipality to buy an electric blower? Where you talk about the small, property owner, the first time buyer, we can buy an electric blower, it's really nothing relatively with a $36 million budget, or the school with a $110 million budget, or a country club. They can buy an electric blower, they can absorb that cost better than a homeowner. So why shouldn't they have to pay for that equipment?
Well, why don't we?
Well, it's
think we
something
should.
which we can discuss,
I think we should, I think it's a good
really,
point, I
lead
think
by
it's a good point.
example, if that's, I mean, I would feel
I
like,
agree 100%, I think it's a very good point. And truthfully, the fact is,
and
now
then
that this
let's
has
put
been
ourselves
scaled
to the
down,
test of whether or not it's something we can absorb,
That
and
has
staff
been-
can absorb without incremental help. I think that's a totally
I
fair
agree,
test.
100%, and now that it's been watered
think
down,
that's
the
where we
fact is,
started.
maybe we
Well,
don't
I'd
need
like
these
to see it out,
exemptions,
yeah.
because it's been watered down already.
But I think some of it's also adjusting expectations, like maybe
Yes.
you don't need to get all the grass off your driveway or your walkway, or maybe you don't need to do things that you did before, just like with the plastic bags, you said, oh, it's gonna be a pain in the neck, I gotta carry a bag with me all the time now. It seemed people adapted pretty easily once you got used to it, so it may be, at least in the summer, that it's not as big a deal. I get with the leaves in the fall, that's a much bigger problem, but some of
That's
it
what
may
I'm
just
to.
be adjusting kind of habits and expectations as well.
I'd like to follow up with what Ivy said. And there's an expression, and it says, if not us, then who? And if not when,
Now,
if not now, then when? It has to be now, and she's right. They just came out yesterday and they said that it's humans
yeah,
who
50%.
are creating a crisis. And there is no reason why we cannot just take a little step to make this earth a better place. Because we are the voice for Mother Earth. She doesn't have a voice except for us. And we are her voice. And it needs to be said that each of us can do a little bit more. And if not now, then when? It's going to be now, and it should be.
I just have a question. So how will it be enforced?
Well, I think anything else is gonna be
It's
difficult.
neighbor ratting neighbor out.
The legislation.
No, I mean, it's how, I
Well, I
mean,
think it's
the-
certainly be easier in the summer, you know, because you'll be able to notice the difference between a gas blower and an electric blower.
So
So,
basically
I
a
can
neighbor
speak
would
to
have
that.
to,
Or
okay.
some-
No, I mean, I can speak to that.
It's actually a legitimate question, isn't
No,
it?
no, no, and I
It's
sort
very
of, I
self-knowledge.
kind of went quickly over it for time purposes, but I'm happy to talk about it, we addressed it in the report. We spoke to a couple of towns about enforcement because it is an issue. And we thought the most focused way to do it, and we would recommend, is that in the beginning of the season, June 1st, the first week, the police would go and do a sweep of the neighborhoods and advise workers and landscapers. We have this law, and we need you to comply. And week 2, they go and give, hand out violations, and then it just helps in terms of later on in the summer, because you've had a little bit of, hopefully deterrence and compliance. So it's one way, and there was another town, there was a town specifically who had said that's what they've done, and that's kind of what we thought might be the easiest way to address enforcement, which is a problem. And also we would have education, has to go hand in hand.
Yeah.
You know,
Right, 'cause
education
that
on-
works as long as there's good education beforehand, cause I'd hate to go one
Yep.
week and say, this is now the law, and the next week
Yeah,
hand
I
out
don't think we do that.
violations,
I don't
is not
think we do
giving
that.
time.
Right.
So,
Plenty of ways to talk about it, but
yeah,
for sure.
but we do have to do the education.
Yeah.
And Lauren, I mean, we get emails all the time from people complaining about their neighbors, and it's not, I don't mean I mean, people put up fences, sometimes they don't clean up their property, they don't pull in their garbage cans, they do things.
dog poop.
I mean, it's not, they do construction at all hours of the day, they blow their lawns at all hours of the day. We get complaints, I mean, it's not, I know it's bad ratting at your neighbor, but the truth is that,
It's not even brought in, neighbor, part of it's going to be self-enforcement, you wanna be the person who gets caught and be embarrassed that you're the one who's out there blowing, knowing full well, your dog may poop and no one sees it, but if you're out there blowing your gas blower in the summer, you better believe, if you get caught, you're gonna be embarrassed, if there's been a lot of education, so I think a lot of it's self-enforcement, and I think it'll eventually be successful.
Okay, we ready to move on?
Eric,
So can you guys, Tracy, can you add that to one of your slides, just a little more information about enforcement?
Yes.
Okay.
Eric, you raise your hand, if you wanna say
I'd
something,
like
let's
to
say.
thank you for the cemeteries, but we will, the next time we buy a new unit, we'll get an electric one so we can compare it with our other units. And gradually we'll switch over if they work.
Is there any other?
Secondly, from a viewpoint of comparing to the down county, by and large, they're smaller lots. And most of the municipalities down there have relief pickup or during the summer, grass pickup, et cetera, which we don't offer up here. I don't know whether that has an effect on anything that holds here. And one other thing is I switched to mulching some number of years ago, but a lot of my neighbors don't. I'm wondering whether the town couldn't take an attempt to see about trying to encourage mulching or grinding everything back in rather than a cleanup type situation. That might have a more effect
Yeah, I think so.
than doing the other one, because from my gardener's viewpoint, he says, put it all back in the soil.
Could you do a little endorsement for us? I think that would be great, if you could. We'll work on some educational, but maybe some feedback from you would be, some testimony would be lovely. That was a great thing.
I could point him in the right direction. Cornell is doing studies on mulching. If you go on Rutgers website, Rutgers in New Jersey, they love you to leave the clippings on a grass. The issue with that, now, may I speak, Rob? Do you wanna shut me up again, or can I just,
By all means, go
help
ahead.
educate the group here?
I actually was pointed, you say, did you have something to say?
One of the
Right.
issues with mulching is you're gonna have a piece of equipment running longer than it takes to cut the grass. So there's mulching blades that they've come out with, there's mulching decks. They're not completely efficient, especially if the grass is moist. So what you're gonna have is contractors running mowers probably twice as long to get rid of those clippings to satisfy a customer. I have 3 acres of grass, I leave my clippings on there, I really don't care about a clump in the lawn, it just, when it dries up, you cut a blade of grass, the moisture comes out of it, by the afternoon, it's done. One of the problems we have is ticks around here, and we were having a discussion about, doing something in one of the parks, to educate people about ticks. We did something with the DEC recently, and there's a company that is a vendor for us. They have all integrated pest management, non-toxic, friendly to the environment. So, but getting back to that, I will get you the information about the mulching. But it's still up in the air.
I graduated from there, so I'll write them back.
We could do a presentation about the ticks, we have a committee that actually works on that issue. And if you wanna come in and do a presentation on ticks to the community,
I think
that'd be great.
And you're still blowing for the majority of the year, and you can still use electric that'll still blow what you need to blow. So, I don't believe, and certainly I've not read the science on it, that if you blow your lawn a week later, you're not gonna have ticks there again. Or whatever other critters are walking around, so it doesn't stop it, I don't think it's.
ticks and leaf blowers are really all that connected.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, I think this is sort of something that could probably be debunked.
But I was talking about ticks in general, not just the leaf blowers.
I think I had given you
We have a tick problem.
You did.
some organic tick control. We'll get into it.
You can do a presentation on that, it's a separate issue. Just with also the pesticides, we could do something on that too. Listen, what I had suggested also, and it's something we could consider, is a voluntary green certification for landscapers. And it doesn't have to be enforcement, and there's no enforcement. But if we have a set of standards, and if a landscaper meets those standards, then they get the Newcastle green certificate.
carrot, it'll work.
And basically then, that's something they can use for marketing purposes, that we're a green landscaper in Newcastle, and if people appreciate that, then they'll hire that landscaper, no pesticides, whatever the issue or whatever the standard is. But I think it's something you should consider.
We agree with that, and that's why we put in the report, is the idea of doing something like that. We feel that we need to work with the board a little bit more to see
But we
what
should
an
do
acceptable
that, we
program.
can work with the landscape associations, but the fact is, that's a win-win. That's a win for landscapers who make a commitment to the environment, it's a win for the residents who care about it.
Alright, we done?
Jill, in terms of going through the things, I was wondering if we could,
Wait, are we done with?
oh no, cause we were talking about
I think
language.
I think we're good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, so
Thank
CPACE
you.
financing program, I
June 11th.
understand a little bit more
Thank you
as
very, very
wetlands
much,
permits.
thank you.
Yes,
Thank you
I'm
so
sorry.
much.
CPAC, did you wanna hear about it?
I read it, but I'm not sure I fully understand.
And public comment, commences immediately, right? People today.
Oh, always get an email, yeah.
It's still open, okay, great, yeah.
Yeah, we've been getting emails.
So do you wanna tell them? I mean, it's just,
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you so much, you guys did a great job.
Steve,
I read it, it looks like it was like basically a tax,
looking for leaf blowers, I can see it.
a financing
I can see
program
roving around.
Deputize him.
Make sure it's the
and
right
that
one.
it's below the town and above the mortgage.
All the fines I do that for bags.
She's gonna come and talk to her in a public hearing.
Not doing that.
And this is a law.
It's already existing. This changes the existing law. It takes the town out of it. In some respects, yes. We no longer build the property, it's no longer gonna show up on the taxes, we're gonna build them directly. No.
Guys, can you take it outside, just as dog tape?
The energy is coming to build gas, the town will not, won't appear with that show.
If we're having this conversation that we have to be listening to, I can't hear you at all, so.
Guys, can you wait to?
Well, push it out.
Guys, can we put the conversations outside, please?
Martin, lower your shoulder, Martin. Lower your shoulder.
You're welcome to stay.
When I was a kid, I thought that meant you was both.
Well, at least I'm good.
okay.
That's what I was told.
So, the
probably were
next item
told
on
that.
the agenda was Energize New York versus CPACE financing.
Take care, take care.
Bye.
Okay, yes?
So the town already has a law in effect that adopted, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago.
What are we talking about?
So the, what's
Just
Energize New York.
Energize New York that allows,
On the agenda.
that allows homeowners to get energy improvement loans to put
Got it.
solar
Not
panels.
homeowners,
Yes.
Oh, it's just commercial properties.
CPACE is only
CPACE.
commercial or nonprofit or residential,
limited.
multiple.
Multifamily, yes.
It's important.
We wish.
You know, it's a big distinction.
The opposite, actually.
Yeah.
So there's been some changes to the program as administered and authorized by New York State, so they want us to change our local law to be consistent with the way the new program will be administered. Some of the benefits are that CPACE, which is the Energy Improvement Corporation, they will bill the property owners directly and it will not appear as a charge on the tax bill. The town is no longer responsible for guaranteeing the loan payment. Under the old law, if someone defaulted on their payments, the town made it up through the taxes. And then there's a whole bunch of other improvements. There's going to be a public hearing on this local law and representatives from CPACE will come here and explain it in more detail.
Is there any negative?
Not that we've seen, no, because it streamlines the program and makes removes the town from being in that business.
Okay.
So all your action you're being asked to do for next meeting is to schedule a public hearing. And we'll have a more detailed presentation at that time.
Okay.
And this we will try to put on for the 28th though.
And there's nothing in the EIC municipal agreement that puts
You
any
guys
burden
have
on us at all?
I'm not gonna say it doesn't put any burden on us, I'll summarize for you what those burdens are when we have the public hearing.
Okay, thank you.
So, next meeting, we're gonna set the public hearing for this.
And not burden, but
for-
obligations.
For 5/28, I believe, is the date. Okay, because we really have to, this should be approved in May.
Yes.
The softball game started.
So Christina, you,
28 town vote,
Softball game started, right?
so 2 weeks from
They
today.
don't stop it. Unless the town releases it like a five.
Oh, that's 3 weeks?
Those
Oh.
idiots.
oh, I'm sorry, you were looking at the 14th, yeah. So, the only thing is, Christina, you may wanna put it in the paper now.
That's what I'm, the program with the math is
The
that.
math. One day at a time.
Yeah, that's good.
I just read that CPACE stuff like an hour ago, so. Okay.
Okay,
Alright, next.
what else did you wanna,
No, I mean, I
anything you
think
wanna
if we
just
can
get
go
to?
through, I don't think anybody's gonna have a problem with the vape law or anything else, I mean, what topic are
Um,
you done
we
on
had
the
comments from the,
wetlands permits?
The comments from the planning board with the vape law.
right, we had comments from
We had-
the planning
They
board.
actually had a lot of issues with it.
Can I actually say something about the planning board's comments? So they came back and they said there's no urgency on this because it's not get included in the budget. But the legislature is still in session.
Still session
Yeah.
till June,
So,
right, they could, and they've done it in the
and
past.
the intention,
Yeah.
at least the governor says, was always to do it outside of the budget, so
Yeah,
so I don't think that,
Yeah, I agree.
I
And
don't think
also,
we should delay
I agree.
because we don't think it's gonna happen.
and also just, what I thought you were actually gonna say was, I mean, initially, we were not even sure if it was gonna pass, but then we felt that we added to the vape law, it was sort of like, not that big a deal. And they're saying it should be a separate law, but we're saying, you know,
I don't think so.
It doesn't need to be a
They're saying
separate
it's
law.
a separate, they want it to be a separate law, they want us to go through the same level of mapping and analysis that we did for the vape law.
But why?
I think in their
Because I think they feel
discussions,
like
it
there's
says-
new properties, including Chapel Hill Crossing, that have come online since that time.
But
that should
that's
be
still
looked
That's right
very
by
close
school.
to
To
the
a
school.
100%,
not-
I
it is
agree with you,
not
I don't
within
understand why we
2,000
would need to
square
do the
feet.
mapping again, but that's what they've requested,
might
it's not
be.
a separate law,
No,
it's
It
just
might
the-
be.
Just from the school to the property line?
Well, and there are
Well, it's got-
also, there are
Closest
also
thing
public,
they've done.
public trails in there, so I think that may actually disqualify it. Because it's near
What
public,
about a drug treatment?
public recreation.
we have
Maybe it can't be within a
facilities?
certain drug treatment
Cause
facility.
that would cover
have
it.
that in there?
So there are medical facilities within.
No, no, no,
the-
I know that.
The other thing that the planning
No,
board
same
said,
as
right,
me.
is that they want us
That's
to
a good idea.
consider, and Nick, this is a question for you, they want us to consider whether we should just outright ban the sale. And so I think our feeling was that by attaching this to the vape law, we would at least be somewhat protected from legal challenges, because there's a rationale and an analysis that have been done and so on and so forth. Do you agree with that?
I do, we still do, that was our opinion initially, so we still think that's the route that should go. If you were going to ban it completely, I think you'd have to do more studies, more
Yeah.
examinations, and take
Yeah.
longer.
Rob just brought up an issue as potential,
Did you say good point?
good point.
No, I said, could we add drug treatment facilities to to the things that
Separations
have
to
to
be
be,
separated.
right.
Right.
Totally
Yeah.
good idea.
So
Yeah,
there is
that
one
would-
at Chapel
that
Cross.
would-
That's an excellent idea.
That's a logical
Yeah.
I actually said it to him moments before he said it out loud.
And hospitals can be right next to them.
Oh, you got Northern Westchester there too.
Yeah, so maybe we should,
That's not
maybe
a
the
drug
amendment
treatment.
shouldn't
Was that a
just be
permitted
for
use? Would that-
recreational
Would that be like in the same?
marijuana, but also the
Well, certainly,
amendment.
it seems.
Schools, churches, playgrounds, do that?
No, different animal. The other thing I just wanna say about Village of
justify that.
We
Pleasantville
can justify it, yes.
is
That's
that
a good idea.
I don't think that there is a space within Pleasantville where you would be, where you could be far enough away from a school to make this law work. Because we
Right.
had this years ago where people wanted to outlaw hunting within town. And Pleasantville does, we can't. The DEC actually controls it, and it has to do with the distance between houses and things like that, and because Pleasantville is such a tight village, they actually can prohibit it, we cannot.
What is the distance?
I have like a memo on it, I will find it, it's like 200.
I would really like to read that memo, actually.
I'll find it for you.
Yeah, I don't want my neighbor putting one in me. One
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's really interesting, there were people that were hiring hunters to control the Canada geese population on their private lakes and ponds. And the neighbors were up in arms about it, and they asked us about outlawing it, and we couldn't. So I wrote a memo, I will find it for you, but
Yep. And so the amendments to the law would be to add drug treatment facilities to the separation.
Yeah.
Whatever
That's a great
changes to
idea.
the.
And how would you define that? Because anywhere, it wouldn't have to be a drug treatment facility, it'd be anywhere that people are treated for drug use or,
Yeah.
Right.
as
Right,
opposed to a
it's not
facility
like-
for drug treatment, because that.
Maybe
Maybe
it's
a
like a
license.
hospital or a.
Maybe
Yeah, but that would
license.
expand it
A
to.
medical facility.
Well, it wouldn't be any medical facility, like, if they're doing PT work, that's not a
Right,
reason to necessarily ban it, but
Well-
if it's a drug treatment facility, it is.
They must have a,
medical
they must have a special
facility, like a
license to
church
dispense
and
certain
I
drugs.
mean, we'll look into it, I'm sure there's.
everybody walks through there.
Yep.
It's a kind of,
With some of the drugs they're dispensing, they gotta have some sort of special license.
Lauren, I think Sabrina sent us yet another revision of this environmental coordinator
So
law today.
could you just give me a sense of
But we already have
what
churches.
this is?
Or that's
Can you
just-
describe it
How
to me?
about anywhere that's
In
not
English.
exempt from electric blower?
The ERB?
Right.
Yeah.
You can't have within 100
Courses
feet of
are
an electric
okay.
blower.
That needs more analysis.
So they were
Whatever
just
was
trying
commercial,
to,
that, the Juuls, like, they didn't
in light of the
have
fact
one.
that Steve's not gonna do with the ERB anymore, and he was the one that really shouldered the majority of these reviews, they wanted to try to expedite the permit review, and that was basically for emergency septic repair and some shed language.
Right.
Just a basic question, which is so Steve is so lovely and has been in this role for such a long time and is a
Asset?
noted expert. Why are we taking and expanding the role of the autonomy of the environmental coordinator if we're going to have a
Because he
less qualified individual?
Greener.
Why don't we less qualified, we're gonna be
A
different.
greener
a different,
I'd like
environmental
me to be less
coordinator.
qualified because he had
Well, I do
Yeah,
think for things
institutional.
like septic
Yeah.
system failures,
beyond
Yeah.
environmental.
we don't have an environmental review for that, if somebody has to go through. You're talking about an expedited review in what way? I mean, it's an emergency repair.
right, but it shouldn't have to go through, well, we had some changes, like it used to be wetlands inspector, it's now environmental coordinator. It had to do with
That's not your septic
yeah.
though.
Right, this, I mean, in the email from Sabrina that's in the packet on page 80, Sabrina sets forth rationale that these changes are recommended by both Steve and the ERB because they're apparently, for example,
I didn't understand that.
even though they come in for permit reviews, they're being granted those permits. So it was felt that, for example, 15 cubic yards equates to a small dump truck, was sending all the permits to the ERB. And they felt that was
Oh,
just.
yeah, totally makes sense.
Right.
And when he's saying the criteria should be 100 cubic yards, which is a large dump truck.
Fair enough.
And 200 square feet for the shed?
That's big.
That seems quite large.
It's like this room.
200
I-
square
I thought
feet
it
is
was
the
really
size
nice.
of this room. This room is about 800 square feet, to give you a sense of
This is
scale.
not 800.
That seems,
No way.
that seems
Jim,
quite large.
Jim, you know the exact
Not a
dimension of this
Manhattan
room.
apartment.
How big is this room?
I've done a lot of research on this room.
She's done a lot of research. That's I've heard that comment a lot, you've done a lot of
200
research.
square feet
I'm
is-
Jim, I do a lot of
you
research.
said?
This is like
Yeah,
15
that's-
times,
This is
maybe
15
30.
These tiles right here are 1
The
foot.
point being, 200 seemed large.
20 brings you to this
No,
light
too
line.
large, no?
Okay,
I
that's,
thought it was a little too
that's
large.
200.
I thought it was too large too, I made a comment, that's a huge shed.
That's a big shed.
That's a tiny shed, you guys.
That's a big shed.
Tiny.
So we can
Tiny.
discuss
It's
the time
literally
and even have
Are you measuring us?
Okay.
Jim? Like, you really doing
10 by
that?
20?
Shed being constructed in wetland?
So why don't we ask Tom and Steve to look at that and.
Yeah, and then 200 square feet, is that square footage in terms of the ground space, or is that just 200, because higher could be?
No, it's the
Wetlands
footprint of the
includes
building.
the buffer,
Alright, we'll get some clarification on that.
No one's gonna construct a shed in wetlands, actual wetlands.
Certainly people do all sorts of stuff with it.
No,
No,
they're not gonna
yeah.
construct a shed in actual wetlands, to store stuff, they'll do it in the buffer
What's the
zone.
buffer, right?
Right.
Okay, we'll get that clarification and come back to you on it. Extension of downtown zoning moratorium, our current moratorium is going to
Expire in June, and we
Yes.
need to expand it. The steps to do so is to introduce a local law, refer it to the county and the town planning board, hold a public hearing. You'll see the local law includes some of the language that Sabrina had in her memo that explains what you've done, because you can't just extend it, you gotta show that you've actually worked on it, which you have, and that you continue to work on it. So the law justifies it, and introduce it, schedule the hearing, refer it.
Okay.
So what are we gonna set the public hearing?
At next week's, we have enough time.
Okay, and then that's gonna be for the 28th of May as well.
Right,
Okay.
so setting up the 14th gives you sufficient time.
Yeah,
And the
so
planning board has,
Christina, you should put that in as well, okay? So this is,
it gives us enough time to get to the planning board as well for their meeting on the 21st.
Cutting it close.
Yeah, we're getting real close, we gotta make sure we get this.
You guys gonna bank on trees now?
We have a tree fund,
That's the
we're
next
gonna be
agenda
spending
item.
the money.
So,
Good.
at some point, we're gonna get a final bill for our tree expenditure for the downtown project in structural soil, and at that point, we're gonna ask the board for a resolution to take and
Do we have an
transfer the
estimate?
funds. Yes,
Just give me a ballpark, I don't need to know.
it was
Yeah,
50,
I remember what it was last.
like $60,000 for both?
Structured soil, just for anybody, that's what's gonna keep the roots, force the roots down, as opposed to
Out.
Out to that.
out and up, breaking our soil.
Don't worry about it, the ballpark is good enough.
Okay, good. Okay, what's our next thing, tree bank fund?
Modifications to the local law.
Soil, soil.
Okay, so as we were going through our tree bank legislation and we revised our tree law last year to include watering and mulch and shrubs and things like that, one of the things that we realized is that one of the biggest expenditures is actually removing the existing trees in an area where we're going to be replanting. And so we wanted to modify our existing tree bank legislation to allow us, for those areas where we're going to be replanting with tree bank trees and funds, to allow us to also incorporate the price tag of the removal under the tree bank.
It strikes me as counterintuitive.
Not necessarily,
The tree bank is a fund that people pay into when they're
plant.
going to remove a
plant
tree.
trees.
right, I understand that, but if you're going to compromise potentially the health or the ability to plant a new tree, then you should be able to remove
Well,
that which
no.
is preventing you from doing so, which is the stump of the old tree, whether it died on its
That's
own
not-
or whether it's,
Yeah, that's
whether,
not the
I don't know, I don't have no problem
I
with that.
think that what you're talking about is the situation where a tree is either sick or in decline, and the reason for planting is to make sure that it remains a green space that's healthy. Is that correct?
Is this really just a way of using tree bank funds to pay for the removal of the trees downtown?
No, because that's separate and apart. That we're
So
not
is there,
paying for that.
would you be prepared to?
So what is it for?
So we have situations where we've got offsite mitigation, where you can't plant in a certain area because you don't have the space. For example, when the firehouse, right, had to make a contribution to the tree bank, there was offsite mitigation, Con Ed has done things like that. So there are areas that we wanna plant where trees are either dead or dying and we wanna come in.
Oh, so
we
you're
have-
calling it offset mitigation
That would be one of the situations. The other situation would be where you have dead and dying trees and you'd like to be able to plant new stuff. It costs us $6,000 to take and remove a tree from that area. The cost of being able to replant it
I
is
understand
dwarfed by.
that, to me, when
I
it's a
think
tree
that's-
is in decline or dead, that's like okay, because it's a safety hazard and it's also a health.
Right, so I wanna be very clear
But
about
I
this.
think
We're not
offset
talking about-
mitigation is different, because offset mitigation means that you as a town are gonna disturb an area, but we don't have to pay to the tree fund.
No,
No,
it
we're
wouldn't
getting
be
the money.
town, it would not be
I'm just
town.
concerned that we would
Oh.
be redirecting money that's meant to be used for planting.
Well, any
But you would have to, I guess the other piece would
But
be,
removal is something that we already have a budget for, it's already part of our.
No, so I wanna be very clear about this, when we talk about removal, I'm not talking about right of way stuff where you know, we've got trees that are hanging over the road, that are hanging over a neighbor's property, where we have to take and remove it, it would never be used for that situation, because we'd never replant those trees. We're talking about an area where, let's say around the train station right now, we've got some very old cedar trees that are sort of mangled, they've lost limbs. We'd like to be able to take and replant that area. The cost of removing those existing trees so that we can replant with tree bank, the cost of the tree removal is 4 to 5 to 6 times the price of the replanting.
Does that open an argument that someone else who's required to give money to the tree bank, to fund the tree bank, would say, well, I don't need to because I'm removing a tree that's dead or dying, so I no longer have to contribute now to the tree bank?
That's already part of the equation when you go and you contribute to the tree fund, they take into factor a healthy tree and caliber.
I
If you-
just don't wanna have to open something up where like they're removing trees to do.
But on,
I don't think it opens it up.
I don't think it does,
I
because
just
the point
wanna
here
make
is you're
sure.
planting new trees, so I don't see that. In fact, you're doing it to
Well,
spend the funds. The other point is that any expenditures has to be approved by this board.
I feel
So
like
it's
the
gonna be-
optics of this are so bad right now, we just cut down all these trees downtown.
Why is the optic-
And everybody is so frustrated about this, and now we're gonna amend our tree bank fund to talk about removing trees,
I think
use
it's
only
tree
when
bank
you
funds.
replant
Well,
at
it
the same
doesn't,
spot.
it does not say that
It
now.
needs to be
It should,
tailored.
then
It
it
needs
needs
be
to
Needs
say
to
that.
be
tailored.
revised, but I would also like to understand, like, what are we actually using this for? Like, are there some examples of why this change is needed? So can
Right,
we-
because we're going to, we would like to be able to remove trees that are in the circle around the train station area. The cost, why?
Why?
Have you been out there? Have you seen what they look like?
I've been to the train station, I haven't seen a lot of dying trees there.
Okay, alright, I'll walk with you.
I think, listen, the point, if our town, environmentalist, whatever, is telling us that there's trees that are dying or should be replaced, and that we're not doing it because of the cost to remove them, even though we have the funds to plant the new trees, it's something we should consider. I mean, that's just, I don't think the optics, I hear what you're saying, but if you look at if you consider the fact that we have trees that are being recommended that should come down, and we have the money to plant new ones, but we're not doing it because of the cost of taking them down, it's a
If
problem.
it's
the town's not gonna just go cut down trees for the sake of cutting down trees,
I
we're
think
planting them.
I think in all fairness, Jill should
that
come
our
back with a few
environmental
specific
coordinators
examples.
recommending the trees come down and be replaced with healthier trees, I think that has better optics.
Healthier, smaller trees is what it is.
Well, I mean,
The way it's
invasive.
there should be a memo to us about what the intent is, it's an example.
I think it'd be
I
tailored in
think
a
it's just
way,
a law, it should be put in the law.
I think it'd be tailored in a way that
I'm
would
okay
make it
with that.
appropriate.
Yeah.
I think the principle is all right.
And there's some trees that should come down, I know some people are upset with the trees downtown, but the truth is that, these people are just not looking at the sidewalks, they're not looking at the big picture. There are some trees that need to come down because there's other reasons. And, it's not just a question of removing a tree, there's other issues.
No. Okay, the next one is the solid waste removals for town-owned properties. This is a joint contract that we do semi-annually with the Chappaqua Central School District. So we'd like to recommend approval of this new contract with CCST. Unfortunately, the pricing is not as great as it's been in the past, but we were able to bring it down a little bit more.
On this, did we bid this out?
The school district bid it out.
The
We
school
piggyback-
district bid it out, okay.
We piggyback onto them. They do the line share of the work for this one. It didn't look like ours.
who just didn't say anything about it being the lowest bidder or
yeah.
what the process was, so I was wondering if it was a continuation, because it said in here that they've been with us since 2006 or something, so
Yeah,
I
but
was
now
just
we need
curious
to
when the
review
last time it was bid.
The next is a authorization to approve a maintenance, let's just see what we got. This is a revenue. To award
Like the
inspection.
next one.
Yeah, like the next one. This is the way we do it, yeah.
Okay, I have a stupid question on this. Does inspection, is that the name of something, or are they only inspecting? Are they doing maintenance,
No, I think they actually only do the inspection.
or are they just
I
inspecting?
think for $10,000 they're only doing inspections.
So they're just looking at it and going, yeah, it's broken?
I don't think it's a I don't think it's a maintenance.
We have the air conditioning guys.
Yeah, because it's,
Cause I would do that.
no, I mean,
It's not working.
it's inspection, it's changing the filters, it's stuff like that, but it's just basic maintenance, it's not
So
like
it
emergency.
is maintenance.
Yeah, but just, go, it's not
not
like heavy
replacing
duty
the system.
overhauls, they're not replacing anything, they're just.
No, but it's
So-
not just inspection,
Right,
it's
so
it's regular maintenance.
Yes, inspection and doing the filters, just very basic stuff to make sure our stuff is up and running, because everything else they charge us for.
Okay, can we make sure that that's,
Yes,
In
happy to
there?
do that.
It's important, also you waste a lot of money when it's not,
yeah.
So close.
Under contract for the inspection, maintenance of 4 out of 5 town buildings, so to expire at the May. Okay, good, alright, great. Next is, where are we? Street opening permits, bond release. We'd like to accept the CHIPS and Pave New York money for 2019.
What's it compared to last year?
Always
I
happy
was
to get
just
it.
asking that.
What did we get last year? Do you remember, Rob?
I don't, I will get you the
It was
numbers
like
though, because I seem to
40,000.
remember
A
they.
decent amount
it was
last
40, I think it
year.
was like 260, we were expecting like 205, something like that, it was like
Yeah,
40,000.
we got
More
more.
than we thought.
So we got more this year a little bit.
How much more did we get this year again?
Just be good to know since we've had
It's
changes.
two, it was under 300
this year.
No, but it's
Yeah,
plus,
but a lot of
plus
times we get a
50,000, it was like
late,
276 in total.
Sorry, yeah, Page New York
It was
also.
276 or
Right.
something,
Yeah, total 273, yeah.
Right,
close.
but we already included like 200 on the budget, something like that.
So this is more than what we had. Rob always is very conservative about what's coming because you can't make it up.
But when we say 900 in paving, whatever it was, that 200 was included, not the 50
Right,
extra.
right.
So the next is a request to establish the capital project and budget for the town hall escape window installation.
Yeah.
We've got another building going on here.
Town hall is good.
Yeah. That's what happens when you do all the active shooter training
Well,
and
it's
you do
scary that
the
you have to
security.
do that.
events,
We just did another shooting today in Colorado.
Yeah, somebody died, I can't believe it.
Somebody
A lot of
died, so I
them,
thought
like,
I
I
thought
think
people
it's
got
like
hurt, I
eight.
didn't know people actually,
Like 8, that's
I thought 7 were injured, I didn't know they died.
nobody.
Okay. Alright, I really apologize, you guys. The next is an EOQ change order. So this is for the paving of, and it's a temporary paving job, it's called the shim coat. It's to fill in the, we've got some significant potholes between Town Hall, Washington Avenue, and Woodburn. It carries over the parade route and the Little League and where the 10K race is going to be over the next 3 weekends. We've got 3 significant parades, public assemblies in town. Our roads are a mess. We tried to see if there was a cheaper way for us to be able to do this in town.
Yeah, why couldn't we do it in-house?
We can't do it in-house because it's actually a small amount of, it's 300 tons, which seems like a lot, but it's actually not. When we went out to bid for our paving, we go out to bid for above 800 tons, and so we have a different price for that. We actually didn't even award a contract for a lesser price, for a lesser amount, and the pricing is different per ton. So we weren't able to use our contractor, it's too big a job for us to do in-house.
We couldn't piggyback at something for later on?
Not, the problem is the timing. We need to have this done we have it one this weekend, the next weekend, and then Memorial Day, 3 weekends in a row.
I mean, and parades aside, frankly, I've seen people trip constantly on the streets.
Yeah,
But
we
we're
are
gonna
doing.
be ripping it up again,
Right,
so.
no, that's true, but
I
we
mean,
are,
in 2 months.
yeah,
It feels like, I mean, I wish we'd had a
You've got-
conversation
yeah,
about this a
you've
while
got
ago
a lot of
because we could
stuff
have
going on.
relocated the parades, we could have.
with full respect, we couldn't relocate the parades.
You could do them in Millwood, why not?
I have no idea
Small
what that.
kids can march down Greeley, why not?
You have to end up in the same place.
Millwood makes a circle?
Yeah.
Downtown Millwood?
First of all, the merchants.
Not as many, why do we hate on Millwood? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
Great.
the thing is,
And then we should get to and have a big,
Yeah.
huge barbecue
You have the
bonfire. Too late now, too late now, the invitation's about it. Have a party.
At least what it is,
That costs money too.
It is what it is, it is what it is.
Have a party.
It is what it is.
Unless you're cooking.
It's also gonna look much nicer when it's done, besides the safety hazard, and it's, you know,
It is what it is, it's,
whatever we can do to make it look nice.
Could you please, knowing what we know now, all the extra stuff that's coming in, could you update that spreadsheet?
yeah, so, yes, it will be updated with, this is the only change order, and we have
Well,
one
no,
payment for
including-
WSB.
Yeah, including some of the other.
That's WSB, ELQ is in here.
Where is the paving gonna go though?
So we are, there's like a seam that goes where the new parking area is by Center Street coming down, they're gonna fix that. There's some significant potholes around the drainage ditches there, they're going to fix that, come down South Greeley and go from South Greeley down to here.
Can we see if it would, if
Oh,
you
and
could
also
put in a
Woodburn, I'm
little
sorry.
bit, like, just from a safety perspective, not a parade perspective, it's not great, it's pretty bad, like by Susan Lawrence and over there too. The street,
Oh, the street, I can see if I can go, that,
can they do a little temporary, a little bit over there,
North Greeley
same
is
price while they're,
so far gone that one little shimco
I
is
know.
not gonna, that whole thing has to be ripped up.
well, I know eventually, but I'm just thinking from a safety perspective. If we're doing it now, maybe they
Yeah, but
can
I'm
just
afraid
add
that-
a little bit.
She's saying it's
You
gonna
think
be a
it's
lot
gonna
of
make
work.
it worse?
No, it's not gonna make it worse, it's
It's
just
gonna be a
that,
lot of money.
it's a lot of money.
Yeah, you double.
Because it's doubling the amount, the shim is just like a little thin coat,
I know.
that requires, I mean, those, they're like
think that's
divots,
way
they're,
too much.
the trenches are ridiculous.
A lot different than
The good news is that as soon as they're done with the Susan Lawrence corner and around,
Yep.
we told the ELQ that they can start on that road,
Okay.
cause that's gonna be one of the better ones. I'm totally.
all the safety, all
Alright.
besides safety, I think there at least it's a safety issue, it
Yeah.
needs to be addressed as
We don't want the
I think
president.
someone fell today.
Yes,
Right?
Lower King. On the sidewalk, Lower King, not even a, just a regular part.
Alright,
Anyway,
let's go.
okay, next is, yeah, the fence, so there's, let's see, this is for, the Manaheim Garden, which is out in Gedney Park, there's a beautiful little garden that we're gonna be doing.
I thought we were gonna do,
Eva and, yeah,
sorry, I'm fine.
no, so, we're doing a little split rail fence there, okay? So we're gonna award that, request for the assessor to attend a conference, authorization to approve out-of-pocket expenses, for, Bill Spade for the electronic sign, there were a couple of expenses he had doing it. Payment of claims, and then we've got some proposed actions.
What?
Okay. Take it away, Harry.
Alright. I move to appoint Jamel Jones, pardon me, to the position of fourth grade police officer with the Town of Newcastle Police Department at an annual salary of $70,177.17 with an appointment date of June 10th of this beautiful year, or the date Westchester County approves the resignation reinstatement and medical appointments are completed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I don't know why the fourth graders need a police officer.
I was gonna say, yeah, okay.
I mean, he's probably older than that, but nonetheless. I move to.
Wow.
The police officer just went through the fourth grade.
I move to authorize the hiring of Jeremy Goldstein, no relation, for the Recreation and Parks Department, and Catherine Lee for the Clerks Department with the start date of May 13th, 2019, as well as Amber Mildenhall and Luca Giardina with the Police Department for the start.
So they're not actually hired, cause they're senior experience kids, they're just our interns.
Okay, so did I, you
Yeah,
wanna
no,
say
it's
that?
okay, so
To
we should
hire
just
as an
change it.
intern,
Hire as
Jeremy
Thank you, as
Goldstein
amended,
and-
May 7th, 2019.
Unpaid intern.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye, I move to set a public hearing regarding Energize New York Open Sea Pace Financing Program for May 14th, 2019.
Second.
All in favor?
Christina, you're not gonna have time to
I
publish
move
it,
to-
vote.
Yeah,
Sorry, you have to make it the 28th. You're not
I
gonna
don't know why
be
it's,
like.
yeah, sorry.
I move to amend that to the 28th.
Second, we talked about that.
All in favor?
Aye. I move to authorize payment to Saskia and Spade Architects for out-of-pocket expenses associated with the electronic message board for the total amount of $1,751.68.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I
Don't
move
my
to
voice.
approve the payment of claims in the amount of $205,905.87 listed on the summary pre-check writing report and detailed voucher detailed report, each prepared on May 7th, 2019. Checks will be issued and mailed to each claimant listed on Wednesday, May 8th, 2019.
Second.
All in favor?
I'm
Sorry, if you need to set one, we've got, yeah,
79.
yeah, so we've got, just two more actually. So the ADA improvements is 15 at 79 South Greeley Avenue, so that is the Boswell Building and Whispering Pines. When ELQ was raising a time issue with us and saying that they don't, we're not giving them enough time to finish the project, we told them that we would go out to bid separately for the steps, that we thought we would get a better bid on it. So actually, we went out and we've got our apparent low bidder at $29,000. Company is less than what it would
And did
otherwise.
we use this to go back to ELQ?
We did, and we asked them whether or not they were then interested in bidding, and they said,
Yeah.
no, that's okay, you guys go ahead, so fine, it's all good. You know what,
It's more people working.
more people working, I would ask the board this evening to award this contract to Concrete Creations in the amount of the $32,000.
No, 29,000.
No,
No.
because they want change orders and contingencies,
Oh,
$32,500. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Motion to adjourn.
No. I'm sorry, I do need approval of the change order, they are paving tomorrow
Okay.
on the asphalt, I know, under protest.
Yeah.
So authorization to approve a change order to ELQ in the amount of?
$64,948.89.
Second?
We need it first.
We need it first, I'm not up.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
You got that?
Okay,
Is that it?
okay, now hold
You're
on,
up.
you ready?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.